The following is a special Retro Wrestling Rewind Legends Spotlight. You want to know what a true Georgia wrestling legend is and what they stand for? Well, you're about to find out that and much more as my one-on-one sit-down interview with Georgia wrestling legend, the Jailhouse Rocker, Terry Lawler, begins now. Let's get straight into it. We know you first started in 1989. Kind of just go back and tell everybody listening how you got in the business. Were you a fan of wrestling when you were growing up? And just, kind of tell everybody how you started.
Yeah, we grew up here in the South, and TBS, 605 wrestling was the NWA was good, and it depended on which side of the family. The weekends we were at, it was at my dad's side. Definitely we would watch wrestling on TV and stuff, but if I happened to go to my mom's side, not hating on either side of the family stuff, but they were always wasn't too fond of fan, but we always ended up watching Hee Haw. So I got a little good mixture of country and wrestling just growing up, but always loved it, and always was drawn into like the master wrestlers, wrestling number 2, which is he's the guy who inspired me as a kid to want to become a pro wrestler. Of course, like the Jake Roberts before he was even known as the Snake, and the whole Road Warriors and Rock and Roll Express is just, and now it's just cool seeing those people on TV that you always thought were, just bigger and larger than life. And then now I got them in my phone, we hang out beyond wrestling, and so now it's just it's a cool going from his childhood heroes to being sometimes best of friends, and this is just how this business works.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that I've found out in these years that I've been doing it, that it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. It's people you can trust. I mean, there are not a lot of people in this world that you can trust, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that you've run across in wrestling that you could trust, that you trust, with your life, with your family's life, that's kind of how I feel with you. I mean, there's not a lot of people. I mean, we've run in the same circles, and we've crossed some of the same paths of people that there's no chance in hell I'd ever trust them. But, when you come across somebody in wrestling that you trust, it's very, very rare. But going back to when you started, when you first started getting into wrestling, who, brought you under their wing and said, hey, this guy, he could be a professional wrestler, and kind of trained you to become the legend that you are today?
I'm not thinking I'm a legend, but I appreciate those very kind words. It was actually my brother. He's been several years older than me. Got someone to train him down in South Georgia, and then became this way. And then so he would check me out of school and take me on the road with him, stuff like that. So I got to see a lot of the ins and outs of pro wrestling, some of the good, some of the bad, but like you said earlier, the brotherhood of it was just a different world of trust. Like on any given night, you can get those unsuspected injuries, but so it's like you got to have some faith and trust in the guy you're sharing the ring with, just for that purpose. That we all have a life. At the time, there wasn't no, big contracts. Even thought about it on the independent scene. The big fans had a contract, so you needed each other for more than just the match. You needed each other to get to and from the shows, during the match. So there's a lot of trust factor there. But I've always been told that any given circles that you're traveling in, 5 is probably the most people you can count on one hand that you can actually truly trust, no matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, whatever, that you could actually call them or reach out to them, and then they would be there no matter what. So, and you can have several different circles that don't crisscross that much, but just any circle you're currently traveling in, 5 is probably about the most you can find.
Yeah, I mean, and 5 is a number that it's easy to count. And I think there are 5 people in wrestling that I can reach out to. You're definitely one of them. Back in 1989 when you first started, what was the promotion I mean, I've always been curious to, what promotion was it? I would assume that this promotion is no longer around, or is it?
Not that I'm aware of. It was called WAW. Bill Smith and his group down in the Griffin area stuff, and everybody always thought it was for Wild Ass Wrestling, and that's very possible that's what it could have stood for. Me and brother did just very small training sessions, and then he called me and said, "Hey, I got your first match." And it was like a month before my birthday. I'm like, well, okay, I guess he's got trust in me or whatever. So we, I had no, made sense to wrestle him my first match. And on the way to the ring, I'm walking. I'm like, and it just clicked. All the training we've done was on the hardwood floor, the concrete floor with paddings, down in the basement. Didn't really have the luxury of actually training in the ring. So came out through the curtain and all the lights and the music, and they even had a smoke machine. It was a big fundraiser for a local person in that area. And it just hit me. I'm like, holy crap. I never actually stood foot in a wrestling ring, so I didn't know how to properly get into it. I got in the ring and then up against a brother, and he didn't go kindly on me stuff. He wanted me to earn my, and actually he was wearing a mask and didn't even try to remotely bring in the family name. And being compared to the ring was a little bit softer than the concrete and hardwood floor. So when I took my first slam, it felt a lot better than I had been used to. So naturally I kind of stood up and received my first ever Steve Lawler, the famous clothesline right across the bridge of your nose, and it put me back down. And it was a reality check. I needed it. It was a good match for a rookie. It wasn't one of my greatest ones, but everybody's got that first one in the books, and I was happy to get it. So the Griffin area has still a special place in my heart. Anytime I go through and do shows, and won my first championship in Griffin, Georgia, with my tag team partner Bobby Bennett. So it's always been a good little place.
Yeah, and speaking about championships, I mean, you've won many. I mean, what has been, along your career, what has been the most special title that you've won, from when you started in '89 to when you retired?
Let's see. NCW was doing Cornelia. It was NCW, and then it started morphing over into NWA Wildside. At the time, it was the Booker was, big on the ECW style of hardcore, because that was that time of the late '90s, and hardcore was a big deal. So he wanted to do a hardcore division, and we did some TV taping stuff. And I think he had to talk with Bill Barons a little bit into it, and coach him a little bit more to make him feel comfortable doing it. So it was a nice long tournament. We had a lot of hits and bangs because it was the hardcore stuff. And actually won that. The time there was nothing in the budget to actually have a belt itself, but just had the title of being their first ever NWA Wildside Hardcore Champion. And then it was such, a lot of people were getting hurt and sloppiness or whatever happened like that. So and then I got shipped out to St. Louis. So wasn't there to defend the so-called title, and I think Bill was like first of the year he just kind of like it just went to the wayside. So it's kind of like being the first and only, because it didn't last long. And
the belt didn't actually exist.
Correct.
I mean, that seems to be a thing that they did in the past. But I was looking through your scrapbook. Yes, folks. He is old school. He has pictures. I know most people listening right now are like, "You mean on your phone?" No, actually, pictures that you had to go get developed. And I remember in college, I would take a photography class, take pictures, develop them. You don't know if anything comes about, and you can't change them back then. But I saw two guys in here that I was close with, Danny Dees and Glenn Dillon. Kind of talk about those two guys. I mean, Danny Dees, he's a Georgia legend in managing and promoting and booking and whatnot. And Glenn Dillon, he was a great guy. Just kind of tell the people at home a little about your relationship with both, and if there was any stories that you feel comfortable telling, about Danny Dees and Glenn Dillon.
It was good. It was Glenn family on the pretty much the Dillard's Music Park up in Rome, Georgia. It was always a hot place for not only just wrestling, but then a lot of bluegrass, and it was an old drive-in theater turned into a building, side doors, and a lot of magic. If you was going to have wrestling in Rome, that's where it went through. And I mean, it's like all the big names came through there. Ted Allen helped produce, I think, some WCW shows come through there. I mean, like some of the last few names I remember was the Big Boss Man. One of his last matches and appearances actually took place. Arn Anderson was trained in from that area, and actually they're doing a homecoming show up in Rome, I think October 13th this weekend. Big homecoming of him. Arn's there, of course. J.J. Dillon's there, and I think Magnum TA is going to be there as well. Stuff, but Glenn was the commissioner and ring announcer, and for Dillard's Music Park and any other promotions that ran through there, and then Glenn were traveling more with some of their shows beyond that over the Alabama zone and in the White Georgia, and then Glenn was always like family stuff. I remember we're having to shut down the show at Dillard's Music Park. It was such a sad. I was a booker at the time, and just hated to leave, so I was like one of the last wrestlers to walk out of the arena. Got a mile down the road, and my Jeep was running pretty hard, so I came back, and Glenn just said, "I'll put you up in the house for the night." And I slept in, got up the next morning stuff, and Glenn met me at the door and said, "Yeah, I got your Jeep fixed." He worked on the Raiders, something like that, and that's just the way it was. He fixed breakfast and just took care of the guys, and he was one of the boys, and he was as much a special part of the show as the rest of the guys. And then Danny Dees, I got put with Danny as my manager when I started fine-tuning the Jailhouse Rocker character, and we just kind of hit it off, and a lot of fun memories and road trips, and I don't know if you remember, Danny had a shocker was part of his character, and he was afraid of his own gimmick. Like people would get it, sneak up behind him, just make the noise, and he's been known to throw coffee cups straight up in the air, and just all kind of good stuff. But Danny had a heart of gold for what we were doing and stuff, and put me in charge of me and brother booking their shows. And we had it was the Christmas Chaos of '96. You and some of your buddies was there for the EZWA side.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was before I was in, I think, because I started in '91, but I was kind of out of it for a second. But yeah, that EZWA. Kind of talk about your heel. I mean kind of the Rome, Georgia, the NAWA, NGWA kind of the time. It was and sorry to interrupt you, but going back to Christmas Chaos '96.
Yeah, it was that summer. Started tagging up with Eric Paris when we were running as Team Extreme, and leading up to that match, it was the 4th of July big show, and we were teasing the fact that maybe that Kid Ego, that was what Eric Paris was called at the time, was Kid Ego, maybe turning to the good side, turning babyface. And all actuality was we building up for my turn to heel. And the big cage match against the lovable Nasty Critters. We used to skateboard, won the match, and won the belts. Put out one of the Nasty Critters. And then what I didn't expect to happen was half my fan base turned with me. So I was like, I couldn't predict that. So I'm not looking at the crowd and then a little bit in shock, and it was that weird transition time of wrestling. You had your NWOs and all these different. It was cool to cheer for the bad guys in some people's eyes, and you should know that for yourself. But so I was like, it was remarkable event. So we started producing T-shirts and outselling all the baby faces merchandise, and it was cool and weird at the same time. It took me a little bit to get adjusted, but leading up from that summer all the way up to Christmas Chaos, brother and I were co-booking the shows, and we were running at least one show every weekend, sometimes some on Fridays and then Sundays. So it was all over different, Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia area. Came down getting ready for Christmas '96. Everybody's trying to look see what we was going to do for the show, and then brother looked at me and said, "I don't know, go talk to your booker." So him and Danny officially handed me the books and controls of the whole show for North Georgia at that time. And it was an honor. I just breathed in the deep breath a little bit, and then here we go stuff. So with the main event, we had brother Tommy Rich, Outlaw Joel Deaton, Danny Dees, representing North Georgia Wrestling, and then on the EZWA side was Lee Thomas, myself, Demon Master, and Playboy Phil Hefner. And then we ended up using Santa Claus, who happened to be at the time was Mr. Donnie and Shadow from the Harley Davidson crew. So we had Santa in our bankroll. And the whole deal was behind the scenes was trying to get away from the North Georgia Wrestling Alliance because Danny had bought it, but the previous owner had left a lot of bad taste in certain people's mouths, and bad business was done. So we were trying to get away from that banner. So we worked into the storyline where we took over NGWA and pretty much killed it at Christmas, and then the following big show, first year came back out and that's where the NAWA was born out of. So the only thing that storyline was that we got was the name, and that was it. No, none of the wrestlers. So we had everybody fight for their position, stuff like that. So it was good marketing, propaganda just to rebuild the name and keep us in. So I can't remember how many wrestlers, how many fans we had that show. But our next big show was Valentine's Day Massacre. And so on a weekly show, we were averaging 225 to 250 every Saturday night for an independent show. And at the time, the only name with us was Joel Deaton, but he was part of the family. So we were building our own characters. I guess you could say it was more like a smaller version of what would be TNA. You built your own talent and created your heroes, and the fans support us. I mean, I got one of my shirts says, without you, the fans, there would be no us, the wrestlers, and that's pretty much true. And I've always believed the fans have control. Don't give them total control, but you listen to your fans and know what it is selling and what it isn't selling, so you work off of that. And I can't lie, I had one of the greatest crews to work with, because no matter what I asked or suggested to them, they were there. They would buy into it from the first match to the last match. All the guys and girls were in it for the one big picture. It wasn't just me. It wasn't a me show. It was a us show. Because if the show does good, then we all did good. And for fans to come out 225, 250 every Saturday night, something was doing right.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely doing something right. And speaking of doing something right, as you said previously, you started teaming up with Air Paris, and your manager was the Playboy Phil Hefner. How was it teaming up with Air Paris at the time? I mean, he was hot independent star. Kind of just go back and just relieve any fond memories that you had, working with Air Paris and Phil Hefner.
It was early springtime, maybe of '96. And I went up to a show in Gore, Georgia, with Danny Dees, and I was always kind of relaxing a lot, so to speak. And apparently I took over the only couch in the whole room, and I just stretched out and had my eyes closed. And by the time I felt this little bony butt sit on my chest, stomach area, and I opened my eyes, it was Kid Ego. And I've seen one of his matches early that night, and I was kind of, all right, that's the way he wants it to be, that's fine. So I thought it was kind of ballsy. Not that I was anybody, I just thought that was ballsy no matter who it was he's doing to stuff. And we became like friends right after that. And So we started a little program where we were wrestling each other for a few months, and then everything was going good. We're like, you know what, we can actually see how we would become as a tag team, and so that was part of the build up to the 4th of July show that I mentioned earlier in '96. We're like best of friends. He's my little brother, and then he was in with the Centerfolds, which was managed by Phil. So when I joined the program and started Team Extreme, Original 3 was going to be Playboy Phil Hefner and Eric Parrish was going to go as kind of like a playoff of like the Midnight Express. Good friends with the original member, Randy Rose of the Midnight Express. So he gave us blessings to use their music, and so we kind of played on homage there. So Fabulous Frank and Terrific Terry, Playboy Phil, so all the double-digit letters. And so we kind of took Phil and Frank away from the Centerfolds, and that started a little heat there. So right off the bat, after putting out the Critters, we already had another instant angle against the Centerfolds. So we did the Centerfolds. We got to work against Dusty Dotson and Scott Prater. I mean, there's a lot of, the Rick Justice and Bobby Hayes. And we worked with a lot of good teams, David Young, all that. So it was just everything we worked in. And the thing was, we wasn't like a typical bad guy team. We would build up the team we're working and talk about how tough they were instead of tearing them down. And the fans started getting that little semi-respect for both teams. So when you talk about how good someone is, and you're still able to beat them, that just makes you even stronger, because they may talk trash and they just tear people down, talk smack, and not supposed to you just, build everybody up and make them great. Like it was some psychology, but we worked against a lot of good teams. Like I said, we had a good crew. Everybody was there for the same reason.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of the two of the teams that you just mentioned, the Nasty Critters and the Centerfolds, two great tag teams. Just kind of talk about any good stories that you have with them. I mean, I worked with the Centerfolds. Never got to work with the Critters, but the Centerfolds were a unique team. I mean, it was definitely a mid 1990s gimmick, because it was one of those things where they thought their gimmick was they were super hot, even though they were abnormally large wrestlers. But it was one of those things, and another person that you worked with, Skinny Kenny Arden. Kind of give some stories about the Critters, the Centerfolds, and I know you have some great stories about Skinny Kenny Arden.
Yes, Kenny was a hoot to work with. If you saw the card had Kenny on it, you didn't know what was going to happen, because he was just a character. I mean, he's a lovable guy, a jokester, prankster, and then sometimes you never knew how close to the edge Kenny would take his character of putting on a striptease contest or whatever in the middle shows. And we were on a show in Cedartown, and Kenny rolled right out of the ring, and the guy was eating the pizza, and he just reached over and grabbed the guy's pizza and took a bite and was eating the pizza backwards, trying to run from the guy. It was funny. It was David Young told the story, because David was part of it. He told it at Kenny's memorial service. It was Frank and myself against Frenchie, John Arden with Kenny Arden in their corner, and then David Young, and can't remember exactly who David was. He was taking was like a 6-way match, and Frank had a new pair of shorts. We used to wrestle in those blue jean shorts and t-shirts, and Kenny spotted the fact that they were a little baggy on Frank, and caught David's attention, and told him, he said, when Frank's not looking, to pants him. It was just like a little rib like that. And of course, David Young, being who he was, he swore that Kenny Arden said, when he turns around, pants him. If anybody knows anything about Kenny Arden, is very seldom, if any, he was known to not wear underwear. Thank God this time he did have on a thong. It was so when he turns his back, David hopped off and shrugged off and pants Kenny, and Kenny standing around just looking at the crowd, and the crowd is going crazy stuff. And the Kenny looks down, and then starts scrambling to pull his tights and step back up, and gets on the microphone and told Davey he almost let the cobra loose. So it just, like I said, you just never knew what you were going to get out of Kenny. But it was, like I said, everybody was great to work with, and always a show. I tell people if they saw the things we do to entertain ourselves on one side of the curtain, they would probably pay more for that show itself, because we're only in the ring for 15, 20, half an hour. Your shows, and the rest of them we're still self-entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, it's and a lot of people probably don't remember, but I remember back when I think it was NAWA or NGWA, one of the two. They had a TV show. It was on TV 69, and Kenny had he always in his interview he had the videotapes, how not to be a fat slob.
Yeah. Get skinny with Kenny.
Get skinny with Kenny. I mean, he's one of those wrestlers that if you met him and if you knew him outside the ring, you loved him. He was one of those, wouldn't you say, one of those typical heels that could get heat and keep it. I mean, he knew how to work off a crowd. It's kind of like someone nowadays, if they're in Atlanta and they say, "Oh man, the Atlanta Falcons suck," he could definitely work the crowd, couldn't he?
Yeah, he would find that one or two person in the crowd, and then knew what it took to get them there, and then he would just keep nagging at them and then just hold them right there, of course, and then that just caused a chain reaction of the fans building around stuff. He had the mind for the business. He had the body for his gimmick that he was pushing, so he knew his limits, but he used it to his advantage. But he was just a very smart man for business wise, and talented, very talented.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those. If you don't know who we're talking about, then hit the Google machine and you'll understand that he's one of those guys. He's one of those, like you said, he has the body built for the gimmick, and he would play off. He would see a heavyset lady or man in the crowd, and he would make fun of them about how fat they were, and it was just kind of ironic that he played off something that he was at the time. I mean, he did lose some weight, but it's one of those things that he knew how to pop the crowd. Kind of moving on, after Team Extreme, disbanding and all those the promotions. What was the next promotion that you worked on after up in White? Because I remember White, Georgia, in their gym. We had it every Saturday night. After that, tell everybody kind of where you moved on from there.
Yeah, it was I was booking for Danny Steele for that, and then I was booking for 3 other different promotions. Some of them being weekly shows or bi-monthly shows. So it was a challenge. And I was too stubborn to ask for a lot of help for that part of it, but I was burning my mind out trying to keep all the shows fresh and not crisscrossing those storylines, and trying to keep it fresh for the fans and the wrestlers. And they started getting to me stuff, and I just kind of lost it in one of the matches. And I think it was Frank was in that match, David Young, Lance Dreamer. There's a few of those, and it wasn't my proudest moment. And I was ready. I lost it, and was ready to fight everybody at the same time. And so I realized it was. I had to listen to my own self. I always said, if you find a place in your life you're not happy, it's time to leave. And so I left, and just started doing other shows here and there. I think Ted Allen ran a few of them in the Carolinas, and I was here and there still did stuff with Greg Price. He still went to Cornelia for Wildside, and then called Danny one time, and I came to the shows, whatever, to see how everybody was doing stuff, and then got myself back, checked in my mind right and stuff like that, and started doing business again. So just kind of here and there stuff, and then I said 2000 I went to St. Louis for about a half a year, and just only did like 2 shows. Because all I got booked for was hardcore matches, and as your body can connect so many hits before it starts breaking down. So that was a good break. So like, just kind of took time off for a little bit of everything, and then in the middle, the late 2000s when I started, Phil Hefner called me, said he bought a promotion back in Rome. Wanted if I come work with him, and I did, and we started doing business again. So I took it off a little time, but there's two or three people that I've always been connected through all those years. Frank being one of them, of course. David Young, Phil Hefner, and Danny Dees. We've always seemed to, and then Leatherface. We've all seemed to help each other have jobs in and out of the ring, and just those people you just work good with over the years. I mean, it was just like I said, back to our opening statement, it was a brotherhood. You don't always talk to these people day in, day out, but those times when you do need them, they'll definitely be there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is a small brotherhood, but it's, kind of going back to looking back at your career, who was some of the legends that you've worked that, so you had some good matches, you had some bad matches just, over the years. I mean, I know you've wrestled a lot of legends, that people have seen on TV, kind of go down a list, of the people that you had good matches with, you had bad matches with. I mean, it's, we don't all have good matches. So, I mean, some are good, some are bad.
It's like any day. Everybody can have a good day and a bad day. The first name that I remember working with was Doug Summers. And if anybody knows Doug, he had a real raspy voice, and Ted Allen had booked a show up in Rome, Dillard's. And it was one of my rookie years, so I got to work Doug, and we lock up, and he's taking the control, back me in the corner, and all I hear is ha-ta-ta-ta. My mind's drifting off. I'm like, if he's just saying remotely anything, I'm not getting it, I'm dead. And he did that 2 or 3 different times, and I realized later on that was just some of what the veterans would miss with some of the younger talent, was just to see how they react to stuff. And finally, I heard he say something like, duck the clothesline, something, just I can't remember exactly what it was, it's been that so long ago, but he, as soon as I understood, he said words. I couldn't have been happier. That didn't last long because Doug was a rough, tough cookie, and first hit, put me back in check. But so Doug was one of the first ones, and then the Mongolian Stomper, Archie. I got to work for him up in Tennessee, and I just always had respect for all these guys. It was fear, but it's also respect, and Archie took care of me, and just over the years, just getting to work with some of your heroes, like, the Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express. I mean, all these guys, tagging up or teaming against them, Wildfire, Tommy Rich, Dusty Rhodes, running shows here in Georgia on Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. And one of my friends who took a lot of these photos in this book was Susan Meeks. And when I came back from St. Louis, she picked me up from the airport one time and said she wanted to meet her new boss. I didn't realize who it was because I didn't keep up, and we pull in, and I see old friend Ray Lloyd was there at the Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling stuff, and then looked up, and there was the Dream. And so we talked for a while, and Susan's like, when he gets in town, you're going to book him. He goes, oh, yeah. She goes, no, that's not a question. That was a statement. So she pretty much told him I was going to get a job working for Dusty. And he listened. Anybody that was knowing Susan, you listened to Susan. And she was a heart of gold person, and she was running the office for Dusty. And, it was just so many people over the years. We're kind of backtracking like way back as brother checked me out of school. I got where I was doing photography work, taking photos for the guys and some for the program stuff. So I always had a love for cameras. And then me and Susan met during one of those years for Jody Hamilton's Deep South when it was first running. So she kind of got me in the position to share some of my photos for the program. So she opened the door that way. And that's how I really started was in the wrestling business was through photography. And she was a good person. I said, how many of these photos you're going to go through and pull out, stuff like that. But, it's like ties in that everybody in the sport has a job. We can't all be main event. Like yourself, you're documenting history through the podcast. Photographers, people putting it in the ring. A lot of people don't get credit. The shows just don't happen. And everybody has a equal, it's like a wheel. Every spoke keeps that wheel running smooth. From the person putting the chairs up, programs, to the promoter, worrying if he's going to have enough ticket sales. It takes a little bit to make it happen stuff. So everybody should get credit. We're not, as the Wizard of Oz effects, don't pay attention to the person behind the curtain, because that is the show.
Yeah, I mean, that it's kind of like with my my current, as I call it, my shoot job. People at the Weather Channel, people go, "Oh, are you on camera?" I'm like, "No." There are other people that have to make it to get on there. It's kind of like with wrestling. It's like the fans show up, everything is pristine, the rings together, the chairs are there, everything, and they think just one person does it. No, it's many people. But kind of going back, backtracking a little bit, working with Dusty. I mean, was that? I mean, I know you said it was awesome, but was it one of those things that you were like, I never thought I would be able to do this, and it was? Were you kind of in awe all the time, or is it one of those things you were in awe for a second and then you were like just kind of getting down to business?
It was cool. Like, similar effect. Like I said, everyone was taking photos for the people. I started out with Jody Hamilton's Deep South and then Jerry Blackwell's Southern Champs Wrestling. So, and they both ran great shows. So I was on these events with like the Dick Slaters, the Abdullah Bushers, the Bruiser Brodies. I mean, if you was a name, Chris Adams, I mean, like, they always brought in all these huge names, and I wish I would have done more photography where they didn't realize that how great I had it, because I sit around and listen to all these different stories and learning the psychology, and it started becoming the norm of seeing all these names. So it's always going to be that shock value, the awe and respect deal. But having Dusty for a boss was cool, and then next thing you're sitting down, you're sandwiching between Dustin and Barry Windham, and we're all just kind of, in a little small group circle, and just, it felt cool of being treated as one of the boys of their, cause knowing where they've been. And it's just still also the little kid inside me is like, holy crap, this is like people I grew up watching, and it was still a lot of mixed emotions, but it was just very cool, and I've had a good life in and out of the ring stuff. I've been very fortunate just, to have rubbed shoulders and not only I know their name, they actually know my name, which is pretty cool. And especially when we go down to the Gulf Coast Wrestler Union down in Mobile and stuff. And, Ronnie Garvin and all these guys that made wrestling great like it is. Just to have that bond is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's when they started, it was professional wrestling. Now they call it, for some reason, WWE calls it sports entertainment, but it is professional wrestling. And kind of going back to when you first came up with the Jailhouse Rocker gimmick, I mean, I know you're a big Elvis fan. Is that kind of the inspiration for that gimmick? Because, I mean, if people have seen you in the past, in the pictures, you did have a Elvis-like gimmick. And it was great, but how did you come up with that? Was it because you had a love for that, or is it someone suggested, hey, you kind of look like him, grow your hair, do this or that?
It was Deep South started losing fan base to Jerry Blackwell, Southern Championship Wrestling. He started at AWA, so he had all the AWA crowds, talent coming in, and then that eventually got morphed into Georgia All-Star Wrestling, and I was rookies in those years, stuff like that. So I was paying my dues, wrestling as Steve Young, jobbing out, or sometimes get a little, good match opening, for the house shows and on the road, slowly trying to find who I am. And whatever reason, brother got his hair cut pretty short, like summertime, so I think I had some sun in, which wasn't good. It was like more like orange hair is what I ended up having, so I kind of shaved it back. So then we did like a little brotherly challenge of who could shave their head the closest without being bald. Nothing against bald people like yourself, but
hey, mine was intentional, so.
So when it started growing back out, He's going to mention earlier about the Superstars of Wrestling. The 8 hours program was on 36, and then moved to 69. Started going out, and he had Bonnie Blackstone and Joe Pedicino. So I was starting to get not quite a flat top, but it was starting to grow out. And we was talking to Bonnie, and she goes, "No, you look kind of like a young Elvis right out of the military." And she said, "You should, think about that and see, come up with a character." So, like I said earlier, I loved Elvis and had a bunch of his albums. So I'm looking around, going through all the different songs and trying to figure out how I could turn a song into a name. There's a lot of ones that didn't quite make the drawing board. And, one reason I just saw Jailhouse Rock and put an ER in Jailhouse Rocker. I'm like, that has a ring. I didn't want to be Honky Tonk Man. Not to get the Honky Tonk Man. He was a different, style of wrestler. He more of the jumpsuit, and I didn't want that and be associated with that. So I was trying to, fine tune a look to go with the name stuff. So my first tights was the black and white stripes prison outfit. Had the hair slicked back, and it slowly, a little bit of time, I started finding that one. Changed it more like black and boots, and let the hair grow out, and tossing around different kind of jackets. And my mom made me like a gold lame style jacket, and that was like one of my favorite ones. I used quite a bit, and then alternate with a leather jacket. But it didn't happen overnight, and the character did not grow overnight. It took a good, year just to me, play around stuff and finding how it was. But it was stuck. That was like my first truly big push on TV, and in wrestling was the Jailhouse Rocker character stuff, and it was easy. I mean, Elvis was got over easy no matter where it was. And I remember we was up in North Georgia, and I was actually telling this story to Jack Victory, because he was there booking him and Rick Morgan. And it was up in Dalton, and I came out of the curtain, and there was several healthy women on the front row, and just screaming and crying like I was Elvis himself, and being a naive and not too big into the world type person. I didn't know where to run away or keep doing it. So thank God I kept on going with it, and just keep shaking that leg as much as I could, and taking the hugs, and so the fans helped also create the character that I actually loved.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of, the fans, kind of throughout your career, were you more of a fan of, being a babyface or being a heel? I mean, did it really matter? Did you get cheered, booed the same, or is it you didn't really have a preference?
I think to have your wrestle persona get over with the crowd, it's got to be part of you, or it's more. They connect more if it's actually connected to yourself. Brother was always a natural bad guy. He had the size, the look. It fit him better. And to me, it just came natural as just being a good guy. I played the bad guys, bro, but even being the bad guys, I'm like a comedian bad guy, so the fans still kind of draw to me, or they pop for me. But it was I think it was just me for the most part of it. I didn't like the thought of a bad Elvis. Like the Honky Tonk Man did it, but I just didn't feel it. I didn't feel it, and so to make it go across and sustain itself, you got to feel it yourself. Otherwise, the fans, they'll see right through it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a great gimmick, and I loved working with it, and kind of getting to current days. I mean, I know you're retired, but your opinion, with the current product, I know you don't watch much of the current product, but some of the current product that you compared to when you started, what are your thoughts and, your thoughts of kind of comparing it from here to there?
I don't watch much of the WWE program. Every now and then I'll flip channels and catch like the Ring of Honor, which still has that old school feel type to it. Not dogging on any style of wrestling, because if it's selling tickets, it can't be wrong. It's just like to me, a beer. what I like in beer is not what you like in beer, but it still sells. So you got to find your market and your fan base, and it works for somebody just because they got contracts and sponsors and stuff like that. So it's right. Just for me personally, I think it's more of a talk show than action, and then that's what I want. The fans, I've always looked at as wrestling as a therapy. It's the cheapest form of therapy you can get, either for the fans or as the wrestlers, because having a bad day, you want to get away, so you buy, a cheap ticket. You get to scream at everybody. They get screamed back at you. You relieve all your anger. Nobody gets really hurt. There's nobody gets shot. We hope not. But the thing is you get to relieve all your tensions. You're paying for therapy, is what I keep saying. Even as a wrestler stuff, you holler back at the fans. You take some of your aggressions out, and everybody goes home feeling a little bit better and relieved. And then if you're the fan, you have that bragging rights of going to work that Monday. Oh man, you should have been there. I cuss that out like a dog, blah blah. And like the emotion is still there, but it's a positive emotion. So wrestling has to me has always been therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely when you go home, always having a good time, and then you go to work, you tell your coworkers, then that sometimes translates into people coming to see the product. But kind of wrapping it up, in your illustrious career, starting in 1989, is there anything that you regret that you didn't do, a place you didn't go, a show you didn't work, a promotion? Is there anything that if you could go back, you would change about your career?
I would have liked to have done some out of the country work, different promotions, stuff like that. But I never was a gym rat, so I didn't try to get all huge, bulked up and like that stuff. But later on, I've the Joel Deatons, the Randy Rose, and hearing people like Robert Gibson tell you that I could have got over in those places was a good warm fuzzies. Just wished I could have had at least that one time. But I'm not hating life because I didn't make it, because I had a grand time doing what it is. So there's just one thing that you always like thing on your list, just check it off to say you did it once. It would have been cool, but no real complaints. What I did achieve in the 28 years, and kind of got to leave them on terms where some people don't get to have that match the way they want it, or life happens, injuries, and you can't perform anymore. So, but no regrets. I just wish I didn't make some of my life choices outside the ring.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I tell my friends at work. I don't tell my wife, but I tell everybody that there are things that we've all done in wrestling that we're not happy, we're not proud of. But there are a lot of things that you've done in your career that you're super happy with. And speaking of that, we actually have a giveaway. First person to comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, all the social media podcast platforms, get a signed Terry the Rocker Lawler trading card. Yeah, that's right, folks. This man has a trading card. I didn't even know that. And then I look back, it has some information, his stats. It's awesome. So yeah, the first person to comment on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, if you go on to Retro Wrestling, RetroWrestlingRewind.com, leave a comment there. The first person gets a card and a signed poster that he also brought in. Terry Lawler, man, thanks for fit me in your busy schedule. I'm just kind of glad that we're able to chit chat today.
No. Thanks for having me. Like I said, I know we've been trying to do this for several years, and actually, when I leave here, I'm going to Piedmont, Alabama, to do a scene in a show called The Mark.
Is it about wrestling?
Oh yeah, it's like a comedy drama based on wrestling in the '90s. I'm doing a cameo appearance. I think Chick Donovan's in it, and they got some other names. And then there's some Easter eggs that smart fans or the workers will get a little kick out of it. Little innuendos and some typical worker style humor and stuff.
Are you playing yourself?
I think I am. I think that's the only person I really know. If they want to know more about it, it's just go to themarkmovie.com Its production is slowly wrapping up, so it will be available hopefully soon and be in some film festivals. And just like I said, just enjoying life. This will be my second time of getting a small part in a movie. And then I was also in Driving to Crime's video.
Oh, I forgot you're a big Driving and Crime mark, aren't you?
Yeah, they're some good friends of ours, so they've treated us pretty good over the years.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, folks. If you didn't write all that information down, it's going to be in the show notes, so you can just click on the link below. But once again, Jailhouse, man, thanks for coming in, and definitely going to have you and some other legends back. And I see a Team Extreme reunion soon, bringing in Danny Dees, Phil Hefner, Eric Harris, and you. That would definitely be that could be a long taping.
It could be dangerous too. All four of us in one room like that somewhere.
Oh my God! Oh my God! It's the Jailhouse Rocker. You want to talk about the legends of Rome? You want to talk about men who made history in this very building? That is the Jailhouse Rocker.
I mean, these fans are going crazy over the return Jailhouse Rocker.
In the early 90s, the Jailhouse Rocker was synonymous with Dillard's Music Park in Rome, Georgia. This whole crowd is in shock.
But Kenny faced the skinny man, Kenny Arden.
You want to talk about legends. You want to talk about history. You want to talk about Rome, Dillard's Music Park. You want to talk about the superstars.
All over. He's been all over. I mean, he's been all over the world. I mean, he's a legend. And I am surprised and shocked. I mean, the last that I heard was that he retired. Obviously not.
Absolutely. And there was never, ever a bigger superstar in this building than the Jailhouse Rocker.
I admit I was a big Jailhouse Rocker fan in my days, but I never thought he'd be back.
Oh, never.
I guess you can't believe the rumors you hear on the internet.
In fact, I can tell you this. I can remember.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the Jailhouse Rocker!